Oliver, that does it for me in terms of the content. I know you wanted to do some Q&A, so perhaps I could pass that back to you, and then I will try and turn on my video.
Okay, thank you, Peter, for your wonderful presentation. I think something on everybody's mind right now is how do family offices or how do investors, what do they look out for in this new post-COVID-19 world? Where do you think the other types of opportunity space are? Maybe you can have your take on that.
Yeah, no, so obviously, I think the first thing to be said, we're not experts on everything, but we are experts on a handful of things, and obviously in what we do, we try to know that very, very well. So obviously for us, that means it's real estate, and for us it's established markets like the UK, and particularly in the living sector. We like the living sector. So student housing is one of 4 sectors that we look at in that living sector category. And we like that because in our experience of student housing, we've seen that the last 10 years that has continued to be resilient. So it doesn't matter in a financial crisis or CV-19, and obviously we're seeing some immediate short-term logistics because of it. But our view is, the world won't collapse to such a stage where UK universities, institutions like Edinburgh, Royal Holloway, Oxford and Cambridge will be done away. And that despite sort of CV-19 and obviously some short-term, perhaps online learning, that this sort of sector will continue to harvest. And arguably where we are, I think when we invested in student housing 10 years ago, we were delivering 20% IRR. So that's 20% annual compounding returns over 3 to 4 years. Now with so many people going in, that's no longer the case. But the flip side to that is there's more safety, the risks that we're looking at, and perhaps in today's world, we're more focused with risks. So hence that means we stay in areas that we know, and we look at property locations that we know we're very, very comfortable with. So that means we'll continue to invest in these markets, which help us diversify ourselves from just the Singapore or Hong Kong market.
Okay, we have a question coming in from our audience. I'll just answer it live. So most universities have implemented digital learning in view of COVID-19 and preventive measures by government to stay at home. How would that dampen the rentals in PBSA? I think this is very directed at the asset class. Yeah. Maybe you can take some time to answer that.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to be said, and this is consistent with week by week information that we have now. So, when we sat here in February, March, it's a very different time frame to May and June, and almost certainly going to be different in August, September, and January, February. And I specify those months specifically because ultimately, what we're seeing is, of course, the coming out of CV-19 and the response actions from universities, from UK visa processors, as well as, of course, student appetite for what type of learning they want. So in marrying all that together, I think, obviously many of us may have heard, obviously, Cambridge over the last few weeks saying that, look, we're going to move to fully online learning. In fact, that's not actually correct. As time has it and more information has come out, everybody knows that online learning on a full-time basis, and let's imagine you pay for a 3-year degree, that is online learning. That is not the way forward. That is not what students want. That's not what universities want. That's not what the government wants. So pushing against a principle that is completely the opposite direction to what's been said, over time we see the fact pattern stabilize a bit more, and we've already started seeing that. Universities now have to make an assessment of are they going to be open? Is it online or face-to-face? Or where 67% of student universities that have come back, they've hedged their bets. And then they've said, look, it will be a combination of both, and it will open in September. So I think over time, this initial reaction is very natural, but over time, we don't see it adversely materially impacting the need of student housing, but there are adjustments.
I think maybe I can share a little bit. I don't think every single subject that is taught in the university can be done online. For example, engineering, that's my background. There's so much laboratory work, there's so much practical stuff they have to do. I don't think that will move everything to the virtual environment. Also, medicine, for example, you wouldn't want your doctor to be totally trained online, right? There's certain sort of a practical aspect to being a doctor. And so I think some of these fields, you still have to attend school, you still have to attend face-to-face classes, and therefore, the demand for such an asset class will still be there. Okay, so I think we spent enough time on this. There are some post-Brexit questions. So the post-Brexit, there are reports that fees for international students will rise dramatically. Would that affect PBSA? And maybe you can take the other one, Brexit and COVID-19. Do you foresee challenges on construction?
Yeah, so maybe just the Brexit theme to start with. I mean, since CV19, and this is probably not an exaggeration, I mean, since CV19, February, March, I think we've used the term Brexit, even in our business, no more than, I think, 5 or 8 times in the last 4 months. Yep. And then that's been more an inquisitive question to our partners what are you seeing about Brexit? Meaning that Brexit is at this minute a secondary issue. Now, very, very quickly, that will hit the forefront again, because obviously there is a timeline delay. So Brexit, I think it's fair to say that it's still a political sort of tennis ping pong that's being played at. But it's no different to the previous analysis of which is, of course, Brexit is a European-UK relationship. So it's not the totality impact of student housing. It's an impact on European students coming into the UK and the supply and demand in relation to that, and perhaps the research grants between the group. And EU students generally make up circa sub 10% in the markets that we see. Combined with, of course, now this is always moving with the sterling and sort of perhaps more of a push from Chinese students into the UK versus other markets. Obviously Australia, we can include that, to the US of more recent times. There's a neutralization that UK is still a top university. That it won't fundamentally impact.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of Asian families still want to send their children to the UK. I think sometime early this week they did when they did the ranking of the universities in the world. I think about three out of 10 were in the top 10 belong to the UK, Cambridge, Oxford, and Imperial College. So I think there is still a very big demand for Asian families to push their children there. In terms of construction, so from what I understood was that most of the laborers or people doing the construction, they come from Europe. Is that true? Would that impact raw material costs also coming from Europe?
Yeah, perhaps I just tackle sort of construction generally. So I think the bigger issue with construction isn't necessarily Brexit. It is possibly the impact of CV19 and of course social distancing. In fact, like many countries, I mean, Singapore's no different. There are many countries that the construction industry is a large part of it, and it's in the top 3 or 5 industries that want to be pushed to get back to business. So in England, so I use England rather than UK because England and Scotland, they're sort of frenemies. They always have different policies. But in England, we're starting to see that the supply of labour is moving ahead. There are additional costs in managing additional amenities and social distancing. Again, I'm not sure how accurate it is. It's project to project, but someone did a statistical survey that it costs an additional £28,000 in a typical per day project to have these additional amenities. So there's additional costs, but things are moving ahead. And of course, there's a rounding error sort of impact in making sure that the business plan can be done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would just some more questions. So do you expect any legislation or government action policies that would have an impact on student housing as an investment product? Do you think there'll be any pushback from the government?
Yeah, I think, yeah, so there's reference to investment product and then government legislation. So yeah, there's quite a bit on this, but what I would say is government legislation and government intervention in student housing, I think is going up in interest level. To give you an example,
okay.
And we have a project in Edinburgh. Edinburgh is one of the best markets we can do, but Nicola Sturgeon recently put through, again, I think it will be temporary, it's CB19 centric, allowing students to essentially give a month's notice and be entitled to refunds, because the last 4 months student refunds has become a big thing. So that's going to be a relevant point that will have some bearing, but is that fundamentally going to impact the student housing and sort of University of Edinburgh being a top 5 university? Probably not. Now, with reference to investment product, I suspect student housing is now slowly becoming an investment product more to private clients. So I think there's certainly a possibility. But again, as I said, and I made a distinct difference to say that, look, what we do is buy, develop, operate, and sell. We don't. We're aware of many other products that purport to give structured credit, structured yields for a period of years, or sell the pods by pods, which we all know that no one will buy Unit 2B of a 280-floor building. The building itself that Mapletree wants to buy. So we're clear we're on the institutional side of things.
Okay. So we have a question. I think it's a very interesting question. In terms of acquiring new builds in student accommodation, how smart would the buildings be in terms of IoT, clean energy, and does QIP have a state ESG strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think digitizing things and automating things and Internet of all things are relevant considerations in student accommodation product creation. It's probably relevant, but not in the highest priority, and I mean more on the sort of IoT. And at the end of the day, student housing is that hybrid product of it's fit for purpose, it's of high quality, but of course it's in that sort of affordable range of product creation. But certainly what we're seeing, I mean, the first student housing project that we did 10 years ago versus now is of course very different. You used to have to put coins in your washing machine. Now you have an app that you could book the washing machine 10, organize it, and pay with PayWave. So all those kind of 21st century digitization is certainly there. And on the point of ESG, absolutely. I mean, there is smart money to apply ESG principles in what we use as a product. Modern ways of construction is relevant, and usually there is a financial driver for us to kind of do that as well. So the answer is definitely the case.
Okay, so we have another question. What is your contingency plan should COVID-19 delay the construction by 12 months from your timeline? Another construction question. Yeah. So I think we're and I say fortunate sincerely. We're fortunate to have a mix of student projects in different junctures. So one is operational. One is we've bought the land. We haven't materially started construction, and one in 80% completed construction.
And they all have different ways to kind of do with that. But in essence, and what we're seeing at the end of the day, there is a possibility of a worst case that, and the reference is made is of course for a 12-month potential delay. And the impact of that, of course, is a loss of revenue over 12 months. But as I said, what we're seeing, particularly in England, that the labour supply is coming back. The supply chain for us in one of our projects, using that as an example, is fine. So it's a case of mitigating and minimizing the potential loss of revenue in that period that is impacted. And we think that the impact is fundamentally just going to be the upcoming semester, so September 2020 to August 2021. But as I said before, on a week-by-week basis, we are getting clarity, which is one of the most important words. Uncertainty is what creates a difficult business plan, but with more clarity on universities returning, visas being processed, students knowing that they return, in our project, so using ourselves as an example, we think at most there will be a 3-4 month revenue impact on that, and that doesn't kill a deal. There's a conversation and a management to be had in that position, but it's one that we don't expect to go forth beyond certainly 12 months, or even certainly within 12 months.
Okay, I think we're running out of time, but we still have more than 10 questions. I will address the questions directly. We will look at the questions and we will write to you the answers for those who have your questions not answered currently. The most interesting thing about this purpose-built student housing, that is a different type of asset class that many of you may not have looked at or invested in. I think it's a very good opportunity. Fraxter has been looking at various defensive type of investments. Student accommodation is one, nursing care homes another, and also one more in terms of food security in Singapore. So these are some of the themes that Fraxter is looking at. And over the next few weeks, we'll definitely invite you to attend those webinars to discuss some of those issues. So right now we have run out of time. I thank everyone for attending this webinar. And anything else, Peter, you want to say?
No, not from me, Oliver, and thank you for inviting QIP to this webinar. No
problem. And if you are interested in investing in a UK purpose-built student accommodation, do sign up for an account on Fraxter. We should be able to put this sometime end of the month or next month for those that are not already our clients. Or, I mean, you can reach out to QIP directly if you wish as well. Okay, thank you everyone for attending this webinar. Stay safe and stay healthy.